You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
This is episode 146 of the Wisdom by Wessa show on the Horse Radio Network. This is Mike Donnell.
I'm Casey Wilbanks.
And this is Sophia Yagana. Welcome to Wisdom by Wessa on the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
This podcast is brought to you by the Western and English Sales Association, WESA, which provides the world's largest trade events for retailers, manufacturers, and sales representatives of the equestrian industry. In this podcast, we feature exclusive interviews with noteworthy Western and English personalities, retailers, and exhibitors who you've always wanted to talk to. Don't miss out on all the news from manufacturers and retailers in the equine industry.
Our regular listeners, you're used to hearing Casey Wilbanks and Sophia have a little chat about what's taking place around Wessa. Casey, unfortunately, is not going to be with us today, and so it's just Sophia and I. And, you know, Sophia, we're going to chat about a great partnership in the Western world today, but I hear that Wessa has some upcoming partners that you want to talk about, so tell us what's new.
Yes, so we all know that the Wessa Trade Show predominantly serves, of course, wholesalers and retailers. That's what the event is for. But media companies are becoming increasingly important in the industry. And our guest today will chat more about that too. But we just wanted to give them a space at the Wessa Trade Show. So we added an official media information to our website to not just be limited to attendees and exhibitors, but also include media companies. And through that, they can sign up for badges and even some brand new sponsorships and other opportunities.
Now, are there any partnerships we have signed up so far in that media world?
Yes, and we're working on a new one right now that I can't announce just yet, but we do have a whole list of advocacy and partnership connections also listed on our website, and some of them are Future Farmers of America, of course, National Little British Rodeo Associations, we've talked about them quite a bit, and Western Justice. And like I said, there's going to be more added to it, so stay tuned.
French West Vaughn and Baker and Bonner have built thriving businesses providing critical marketing services to clients in the Western world, such as Wrangler and Pendleton and the Four Sixes Ranch, among others. This past fall, they formed an alliance to provide clients with their wide range of strategic planning and marketing implementation services. FWV President David Gwyn and Baker and Bonner co-founder Rob Baker join us today to talk about their new connection. David Gwyn, Rob Baker, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us here on Wisdom by Wessa.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having us on.
I think it'll be a fun interview. You guys, clearly, I want to talk about your alliance and what you offer, but for those listeners who need to be brought up to date, David, we'll start with you, then Rob will talk with you. Tell us a bit, go back and kind of summarize, if you will, French West Vaughn and the services you have, where you are in the marketplace today. Rob, I'll ask you to do the same thing, and then we're going to talk about what a potential client might expect and be able to benefit from your new alliance. So, David, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been president here at French West Vaughn for since 2009. Joined the agency in 1999, so I've been here a very long time. By default, because Wrangler has been one of our largest clients for that entire time, we have become one of the preeminent PR and social media firms within the Western industry. And that has led us to a lot of other work in the industry. And kind of the reason that we partnered up with Rob and his team, and we'll explain how that came together after kind of Rob gives you a little overview of his background.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question now because I've always wanted to know, and maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know, who were or are or was there a French, a West, and a Vaughn?
Yes, good question. Rick French is our founder and CEO, and he is still very, very active in the business. He actually brought the Wrangler. He's actually started his company, which was previously called Richard French and Associates, with Wrangler as the first client. So that's a legacy client of ours. West and Vaughn was a regional ad agency that we acquired in the early 2000s. And Bill West and Tom Vaughn, it was part of their exit strategy. So they had a 3-year buyout. So they have been long gone from the agency. But Rick French is still very, very active in the business and going strong.
Okay, I mean, I'm the only person who didn't know that, but for years, as I've come across the firm, I always wondered where that name came from. So that was your background. So, Rob, give us a little bit of a history of Baker Bonner and who Baker and Bonner are.
Yeah, gladly. Thank you. I'm Rob Baker of Baker and Bonner, my partner, Jimmy Bonner, and I met in art school in Atlanta after college. And we went to a place called the Portfolio Center, and it was really one of just a few schools at the time that prepared interested students for a life in the ad world. And it went beyond just kind of design school curriculum. A lot of the focus was broken out into the departments of an ad agency. So you had art directors, you had copywriters, you had photographers and designers, and it was to learn how to conceptually think of campaign ideas and execute those plans through a 2-year program. So Jimmy and I met there. We worked at a handful of agencies after school, and ended up at an agency in Dallas together, and started working together about 3 or 4 years into that as partners on assignments. And we garnered some success with that. And as time moved on, I think like any creatives do, we talked about starting our own agency. Usually that was over a couple of beers or a late lunch or something like that. And it was just talk and nothing really behind it. And then we got to a point about 4 years ago with our old agency that it just felt like it was time to move on and give it a go. And so we did. We brought a couple of people with us from our former agency and no clients. And so we were really going to learn if we could pull this thing off or not. And fortunately, within the first month, we had a handful of clients in tow that kind of got our wheels rolling. And we've just added people along the way. We've been friends with David. Both of us have been friends with David for a long time. I'm originally from Durham, North Carolina, and get back there a good bit. So we just stayed in touch, and then we started to have some mutual clients in play, and that kind of got us going with David and his team at French West Vaughn. But Baker and Bonner just had our 4th year anniversary, and have just got a slew of clients that we're crazy about, and feel very fortunate to be doing this as we are.
Okay. Well, if anybody looks at the websites, you'll see that your reach extends beyond the Western world, though that's our focus here. But you have sports, you have retailing, there's all sorts of different industries that can benefit. But we're WESA, the Western English Sales Association, and that's where you both have roots. But what I'm trying to, what I want to get at a little bit for our listeners who are brands and who are retailers and who are others in the industry is which strengths or which disciplines or which services you each bring to the alliance, and was there an overlap, and how is this going to work? And if a client decides, I really like this alliance, how do they find the front door, and whose front door do they find?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the reason we came together is because our service offerings complemented each other so nicely. There's very little overlap. With French West Vaughn kind of taking the public relations lead and the social media lead, and Rob's team, leading with strategy and design and ideation. But the fact that we had so much Western industry experience just is what made it so perfect to sync up together.
I think that's exactly it. The storytelling aspect, I think, is the binding thread there. Jimmy and I and the folks at our agency here in Dallas have been on the end of original content and storytelling, really based around kind of emotional strengths, some informative, some informational. parts of it. But I think where we have had the most success for brands and with brands is telling their brand story. And when we go into the process, a lot of it begins for us with strategy, and it can be a bit demanding and grueling. And we let potential clients know early up that that's part of our process. That's how we get to the best practices for the creative side of it. And with that, as good of a job as we could do for somebody in that way, it needs to be on platforms and in areas where people can view it and consume it. And that's where David and his team at French West Vaughn really comes in a complementary role. Their background with PR is just fantastic. And to be able to have all these points of contact for a brand in play and aligned and consistently putting out the messages that the clients have isolated and wanted to speak to, including awareness, that becomes a big part of it. So it really meshed well together from the get-go. And we've been talking about it for a while, and it finally just made a lot of sense to form the alliance and go at it together. And I think that's just worked great for us.
So how would you define the perfect type of clients, the brands or the niches in the industry? Or now we've got this alliance. You've each got and brought to the table some huge brands. I'm assuming that you're not going to take, or maybe you are, but I'm going to assume you're not taking competitive brands to what you have. But what do you see as the type of client that will be attracted to what you now have to offer in the Western world?
You make a good point. I mean, between the two of our experiences, I mean, we have worked on the biggest brands, in the world in some cases. So we definitely have that big brand experience. But we also work with a lot of challenger brands. I mean, we do. We're both firms are independently owned, so we can make decisions on who to work with and be very nimble in terms of servicing them.
I think it is a lot of ways. We came from a background where we were mostly working with brands where the agency was the agency of record, and we were on a retainer. And sometimes those retainers were for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and they'd have to renew each time depending on the different industries that we were involved with. And in that case, we did not take on any rival brands. The industry kind of changed about 5 or 6 years ago for us, and maybe even sooner for others or later for other folks. But where it started to change were brands began hiring firms like ours for project work. They'd have a very specific event, a very specific need, a very specific product or service that they wanted just then. And for various reasons, they were pulling us in as an agency of record, so to speak. It was just, can you handle this project for us? Yes. And we go all in as we would any client with that. But yet at the end of that, we're all free agents again. They're free to engage another branding agency. We're free to engage another brand and come at it that way. So there's a protective element for both clients and agencies in that way, that you're not you're able to use your experience, but you're not vulnerable to sharing unshareable information along the way. So that's been a big change just over the handful of years of how we've taken on clients and who the ideal clients can be for us. I think as a descriptor of the type of clients that we're looking for, it's those that have a story to tell, whether they've told it before and it needs refreshing or updating, or whether they've never engaged in a branding process to tell their story. We're interested in talking to those folks at any time, all time, and coming up with a plan collaboratively to decide what is that story, what are the messages, what are the tenets of the brand that we want to hold dear as we put out commercials or videos or social or website rebuilds or whatever those things need to be, that we're all kind of aligned. And so that philosophy that we have was similar to the philosophy that French West Vaughn had. So when we began talking about this alliance, we were like, that's it. Those are the clients we want to go after. Those are the clients we want to welcome in and do our best work for them. And, we're both full service agencies to a degree in that point. But when we're when we're together working on a client, we really have A to Z offerings for brands. So
Yeah.
that's
And
kind
I
of
and I
our
would
fallout.
I would say Rob and Jimmy's work, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, is more about moments in time, whether it's rebranding, relaunching, creating campaign or whatever. Whereas our work is a little bit more retainer based, longevity. We're kind of embedded, with the client's marketing team as their PR and or social resource.
In the Western world, in our audience, there's really two camps. There's the brand camp and there's the retailer camp. And if you go to a WESA show, they intermingle beautifully, but they're two separate businesses with different goals. And as I look at the website, there's with a couple of non-Western things, each of you have very, very strong experience on the brand side. Are you looking to expand your reach into the retail side, or are you heavy in the retail side and I've just missed it?
I wouldn't say we're heavy in the retail side, but I mean, through our work with Wrangler and Justin Boots, for instance, I mean, we have done plenty of programs with and for Boot Barn and Cavender's and Tractor Supply, and certainly on the mass side of Wrangler with the Walmart and Targets of the world. So we've got plenty of retail experience. We actually had several meetings while in WESA in January with some major Western retailers that we're trying to work with. So
okay,
yeah,
well,
the only
good.
thing I'd add to that is I think both, and I understand your question, but I think for us and our approach and how we're doing work for our clients, there is almost always a retail and a branding side. I think you have to have both of those bits of communication figured out, but to do it in a consistent way and a voice that can stay consistently on message for the brand while offering, traditional advertising messages. That's just a part of the game. You have to be able to do both, and it's a healthy process for us to go through with a client to help them identify those things as well as us point them out. But it's staying healthy as a brand. It's eating well and exercising. You got to do both. And that's kind of how we look at it and approach our work.
Both of you have been in the business for a long time, as have I. I've got, too long of a PR history that I even want to think about. But things change so quickly. I mean, even 10 years ago, we didn't talk much about online media. We didn't talk much about blogs. We didn't talk much about influencers per se. There weren't a dozen different internet platforms and YouTubes and all those things that today's client, I'm assuming, needs to take advantage of and wants to make certain that you know how to handle Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and an influencer and all those things that are relatively new for us in the marketing world, and maybe even newer in the Western world. In the technology world, they were probably ahead of the Western world, but now the Western world is coming to the need of that. And as we talk to retailers, they all are doing some social media. Some are better than others. Brands, some are better than others, especially the challengers. But I want to get your take a little bit on, dealing with new media, new concepts, content is a word, and how you see the marketplace going. Is that a fair question?
yeah, I mean, I think you led us there. I mean, in today's world, I mean, earned media, social media, and content are one thing. Like every program we do involves all three of those. Just looking at, what used to be endorsees has become ambassadors, and that became influencers, and then that became content producers. For instance, we were talking yesterday. We often hire content producers that travel around the rodeo circuit because they're already on site. They're already capturing content. We give them an assignment on behalf of our client, and it's a very affordable way for us to capture content for the brand.
Yeah, and then you need to know what to do with that content, and there's so many different avenues. Rob, on your side, I think it's probably equally fast-paced and changing in terms of what you need to do or what tools you have available that you might not have had available or the client would have been very suspicious of even a decade ago.
Yeah, we still have clients today who are suspicious of some of those tools, and I don't blame them. I think for us, because of what we've all experienced in our careers and how fast-paced technology is and the media outlets are, it is a constant part of the business to keep up to speed with it. And for us, it's not so much making sure that every one of our clients is hitting every one of those channels. It's identifying early on in that strategic process what are the appropriate channels for that audience and for the health of the brand and the growth of the brand. And so once we start to really identify those elements, those tools for us, the thing that stayed the same is no matter what platform you're working from, working toward getting the brand message out for the clients, is it has to evolve around an idea. And I think that goes all the way back to the 50s and the Mad Men days of Madison Avenue to today. And to have the people in place that can create original thought and storytelling methods to be applied to any of those platforms and media channels that you're looking at is the real key, and what can make a significant difference for a brand's growth and health right off the bat. So we put a lot of our weight on that old tool, if you will, but to be able to use the new marketing tools to get messages out to more people, more readily available, who are consuming things that are different on different channels than others may be consuming, because that's our audience. That's who we want to speak to. So I think that's where things have changed for us and where they're still, and hopefully will always be evolving.
I got a question for each of you. If you look back, what's been your favorite program? Your favorite project you did, the one you enjoyed the most or I had the most fun with, or whatever it is that you look back on and say, boy, I loved that project. David?
Yeah, for me, it's probably the development of the Wrangler network. And that came about because of a project that we were working on with Red Bull. And Red Bull had Red Bull TV that, anything and everything, action sports and music, they had on that website. You could watch, diving or, a rock concert or whatever they sponsored on the site. And we basically copied that same idea for Wrangler, and we created the Wrangler network right about the time the PRCA and the television rights were changing for rodeo. And we literally just plugged into the arena jumbotrons and broadcast over 100 rodeos a year. We went to CMA Fest and went to Radio Row, did interviews. We did a George Strait concert at Green Hall in Texas. And that was probably the most impactful program in the Western industry that French West Vaughn has undertook.
Yeah, I remember that. Rob?
Yeah, I just to David's answer, I'm such a fan of what they did for Wrangler and the Wrangler network. And one of the things that really kind of pulled us in with them is just a lot of smart thinking, a lot of hard work, a lot of hustle went behind that. And it's hard not to admire that. It's just great work. For us, there's the old adage, you're only as good as your next campaign for us. And so I'd have to say we've recently been hired by Capri Camper, and a big rodeo favorite. And we are so excited. We're just now, we're about a month in with these guys, and we're starting to develop some of the work. And I can't wait to get even deeper into this process with them and go through. I think that's going to be some of our most exciting and rewarding work we've done in the last 3 or 4 years. But
great.
A career favorite of ours has to be for Ram trucks, when we had 2 minutes on the Super Bowl and created a spot called So God Made a Farmer, the old Paul Harvey
Yes, I
speech.
do remember that. That was wonderful. That was yours. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was, and it was mine, and it was also a lot of other people because we had a team of um, great talents from the production side to the photography side to the legal affairs side. We had that team, and it just went to work beautifully for us. And there were some challenges certainly involved with it. There was a huge stage involved, but there were a lot of offshoots that were as big a part of it that didn't get a lot of the spotlight, but were integral to where the Super Bowl spot itself was really the launch of the campaign for that year, the Farmer for Ram truck. So always fun to look back on and talk to the people that were involved. But those are the two. Those would be my two answers for the one answer you asked for.
Okay, I mean that's great, and I do remember that spot, and that was tremendous. A lot of people that we interview have international business. Even there's some challenger brands that have managed to get a large international business or large for them. What's your international reach? Are you building your international? Can you help our brands and our brands in our sport grow a bigger international market?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. French West Vaughn is a founding partner of a group called IPREX, which is a international group of independently owned public relations firm. We sit on the board of that. We're a founding member. They're regular, both global and America's meetings that we attend, and have used that very successful for several brands.
Good. Rob?
We have experience with growing brands internationally in our past. We're not currently working with any brands that have an international presence or have asked us to kind of look into that. I will say our first client with B&B Creative Emporium was a group out of London, and they had called to ask us to develop a website for them and to get a better handle on their tone of voice and just brand guidelines. And that happened to be our first client, and they were based in London. And so we did some work there, but outside of that, we are really based primarily with American audiences and American brands, but able to cross the pond wherever.
Well, that's why you have an alliance, because if I want something and I want to build my international presence, that's why you have an alliance, because you have the access to the group that David mentioned, and you have the access to your creative. So I can see where that is another reason why you formed the alliance, and why brands who are trying to grow locally, internationally, might take a look at your alliance as a way to achieve both their domestic and international growth goals.
You said it perfectly. That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, is there anything that we haven't touched on relative to the alliance and relative to your personal interest in this that you'd like to chat about that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, my closing comments would be, the Western industry is the most tight-knit industry I've ever worked in. Tighter than sports, tighter than travel and tourism. You know, the credibility and authenticity buzzwords are real, but I've never worked in an industry where the relationships mean everything. And just, you know, the DNA of French West Vaughn and Rob and Jimmy and our relationships we have throughout the industry are what we are hoping to leverage with this dream partnership.
Yeah,
okay. I would think that's a great statement. Rob, add to that when you would, please.
There's nothing to add. David said it exactly right. It is the relationships, and I think always will be. We feel so fortunate to have developed those relationships with folks along the way that I think our work would never have been as powerful or as successful without them. So I think David nailed it.
Okay, well, listen, we have enjoyed having you on here. It's been great to hear about the Alliance from the inside. We look forward to great things that not only benefit you, but benefit the Western industry and the Western world. And I thank you so much for taking the time to explain the Alliance, talk about your strengths, obviously your enthusiasm, not only for the marketing world, but for the Western world, comes clear. And I think you're going to have a lot of success.
Thank you so much.
The show notes and links from today's show can be found at wisdombywesa.com. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it. There is a contact link on that website.
The Wisdom by Wesa show will be published on the 15th and 30th of every month. You can listen on most of your favorite podcast players, and you can also listen on wisdombywesa.com. Be sure to visit all the great shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com. Wesa, where the industry meets.